Yeah, so Jim gave it away. It's just you tell them that they're a security champion, and that's the end of it. So, sorry. No, yeah, no. So just quick, a little bit about who I am. I'm Ryan O'Boyle. I get lots of fun variations on that last name. If I wasn't in this industry, I don't think I would have any idea why this stuff happens all the time. But my background, I was a pen tester for 10 years at Fidelity Investments, where we built up an internal pen testing team totally focused on AppSec back around the turn of the century. From there, I went on to Veracode and started doing security research. And then over time, one of the things that was interesting about pen testing that way internally was it wasn't just, oh, we go after the site, we hand off a report, we maybe do a quick 1-hour call a couple weeks later. No, we were internal. We were expected to work with the development teams from the time we told them the problem until they had fixed the problem. That was part of our responsibility as well. So from there, I went into Veracode to do more product security focus and went from research to actually running our own internal product security, which you'd think, product security at an AppSec company, it should just be the easiest job in the world, right? No, it's not. We still have all the same problems that everybody out there has when it comes to dealing with this stuff. And more important than any of that, one time I was walking down the street in actually Salem, Massachusetts, and a bird just landed on me. And I took that as a pretty big compliment. So I was mistaken for a tree once, which I thought was pretty cool. And so if David in the last talk brought you down and brought you to a dark space, I'm going to do my best to bring you out of there. So I'm going to try something new, and I'm going to ask you all to actually close your eyes. We're going to do a quick visualization. Okay, so take a deep breath in, and a deep breath out. Another deep breath in, and deep breath out. Okay, you're in a dark S-bomb forest, and in the distance, you think you might hear, the howling of a pack of new pivotal vulnerabilities. But you see a path, and you start walking along that path, and you can hear birds tweeting, InfoSec birds tweeting in the trees above you. I think that sounded like the rare red-crested grug, something about an OPSEC fail. But as you keep moving down that path, it doesn't look quite so dark. You start to see some fruit on the trees. You hear someone coming through. It's not one of those vulns, though. It's a developer, a relatively new developer, but they're coming to you asking, hey, I heard about this scanning stuff we're supposed to do in our pipeline. Can you help me get that going? I want to do that. And you keep moving on. You see bigger fruit. You pluck one of those. If you're one of those carnivores we heard about yesterday, it's okay if it's meat flavored. You take a nice big juicy bite, and then you see one of your senior developers come out, and they're not even there to ask you about to ask something of you. They're saying, hey, I think I found this privilege escalation, and I think I have a fix for it. I just want to run it all past you. And they're not part of your product security team, right? They're just a developer. Okay, so that's you can open your eyes now. So, right, so that's the type of journey that we're talking about here of finding ways to have your representatives from your development teams participate in your product security program. Because how many of you were alone walking down in those dark woods? How many product security teams of like 1 or 2 are in here? Right. So that's the problem, is how can you possibly scale your program when you're talking about one of you versus 100 developers or maybe even more. And security champions are the way that we, over the past 5 or 6 years, have dealt with this problem. So what is a security champion? There's a lot of definitions out there. Some of them are, as Jim said, hey, guess what, you're a security champion now, and that's about the end of it. Some of them are a little more concrete, and they'll say that a security champion is someone who's supposed to work with the product security team or whatever security team to kind of just get them involved. But our definition and my definition is a little bit more responsibility involved. So we view it as someone who's a member of one of the product teams, and they don't just participate in activities, but over time they actually take on some ownership of the security and take on some of that responsibility for their product. In that role, we shoot for at least 2 on every team because we want to have that redundancy. People inevitably move around from team to team. People leave the company, new people come in all the time. So we try to have that built-in redundancy of at least 2 for a team. And it's not that we give them this role and we give them that responsibility and kind of throw them out to into the dark woods with the wolves, but we instead build this program around supporting them and training them up and gradually transitioning them through sort of 2 phases of what we can expect from them. And they become that first level resource to their team. But there's always a role for product security or information security, whatever other specialized security teams you have. And they're also not just there to do sort of what we tell them, but to figure out how to incorporate what we're bringing to them into all of the development processes and using the development tools and everything they already know as part of their day-to-day role. And they're also a part of a community or a guild that becomes a resource for them to share experiences, to share the challenges that they're running into. And when we talk to one team about a problem, they can share the way they solve that with the rest of the guild. And an important thing too, I'm going to talk about how we have done things, but keep in mind what your culture is like, because that's going to be the most important thing. The same way we're looking at trying to find a way to adapt our product security asks to the development teams, it's the same idea. Find the things from this that resonate with your culture, or just think about how you could do something similar with your environment. So starting off, we're going to seed the program in a couple ways. Before we can actually start giving people this role and asking them to take on responsibility, we need to do some stuff to get ready. One of those things is to get commitment from all of the different stakeholders in this process. So the security team is presumably your team. A lot of the stuff we heard yesterday from James and Tanya about the ways you can modernize your security program and develop that empathy and all the things that you can do that have already been discussed, I won't rehash, but those are critical in you getting up to speed with the way development teams are working now. And speed is definitely going to be one of the biggest asks that they are going to want from this. And one of the ways it is win-win, because one of the ways you can integrate with them and improve speed is by finding opportunities to give security champions responsibilities and get yourself out of the way. Don't let yourself be a bottleneck for anything that doesn't justify you being involved and being the bottleneck. And that can be a tough thing to do if you've been in security for a long time and you're used to having that sort of control gatekeeper approach. It's a very different model. But then from the development team, we haven't talked as much about expectations from them in all of this. And really what it comes down to is the expectations of the quality and of the product that you're shipping doesn't change. Just because you might be identifying certain tasks that your small product security team doesn't do anymore and that these security champions do, that doesn't mean that the development team gets the okay to just say, oh, well, we're not going to do that. So if you're dealing with a big backlog of known findings from some sort of scan or pen test findings or something that you think they can handle themselves, they have to take more responsibility, but they don't get to necessarily just take that and put it in the backlog and never get to it. They have to buy in that they are going to commit to the responsibility that goes with security the same way that they've taken in responsibility for functional testing, for operational things in the DevOps model. Security is just another thing that they're going to have to step up and take some control to. And then third is management, and this can be sort of people managers or product managers. So while the idea is to have these security champions bring security into all of the things they're already doing, there is still going to be some amount of overhead, right? There's still going to be guild meetings to bring everybody together. There's still going to be small amounts of new work that they have to do as part of their normal processes. And you've got to have a commitment that that's going to be accounted for, and that the security champions aren't going to be able to say, oh yes, we're going to take responsibility for this task, but then whatever process they have is going to continually squeeze that out and say, oh no, well, we don't actually have time for you to do that. Similar, if you've got goals for those security champions, if your organization is very goal driven, you're going to need to find a buy-in for getting security champion activities on the goals program for the people that are volunteering. Otherwise, you can fall into that same trap of security lags behind and too little too late when it comes to the commitment there. So another thing to get ready to launch the program is about the culture. And at Veracode, we were pretty lucky that we already had a pretty good culture around this type of thing before we even started this program. We had a series of monthly lunch and learns where people would come in and talk about any sort of topic. It could be, we had a presentation about Burning Man from someone who'd been going for years and years. We've had people come in and talk about Helvetica and typography, but then also people would talk about security. People might come in and talk about some crypto stuff or the latest big security breach that was in the news and share information about that. So once we knew we were going to launch this program, we made a particular effort to get some security topics that would be interesting and engaging for possible security champions onto those agendas to get it out there. We also hosted things like, after we had people from the various security teams or the security research team go out to conferences, like wonderful places like this, come back and do a summary of some of the talks that they saw that they thought were really good or really relevant to the organization. For things so Vegas in the summer, we would tend to have a whole group of people going. We'd come in, have people sign up for lightning rounds where they would just give a 2 or 3 minute overview of one of the talks that they saw and provide pointers. And those were open, just like the lunch and learns, those are open to everybody in the company. Anybody who is at all interested in hearing more about this could come in and hear what was going on the security side of things. And then, for getting things a little more hands-on with the people that really were interested, we started doing open CTF exercises. We started this actually, this was around the year that the first Hacky Easter competition launched, and that became a really good introductory CTF, because there were some things that were very puzzle-driven and other things that were a little bit more technical and get more into the CTF stuff you might see at a security conference. And that sort of gaming style of it with a scoreboard and everything got a lot of people really, really engaged and involved. And that first year we had something like 8 of our developers complete the entire puzzle set, which was just great. And then from the momentum there, we turned that into just an ongoing weekly session that we have every Thursday from 12 to 2. So we put it at lunchtime to make sure that teams that are really, really hammered, during a sprint or something, they do still typically get lunch, right? So they can, if they want to, if they don't need to go decompress some other way, they can come to the CTF session. And it also sort of functions as product security office hours. We invited info security to join there too. So it's a place to come in, learn a bit about the offensive side of stuff, which makes the defensive advice make more sense. And it's also a single place every week, both in headquarters and online, that they can come ask any questions they want of product security or network security or any of the security teams. So from these different approaches, now if you've got commitment, you've talked to the managers, you've talked to the development managers, you've put some stuff out there in your culture to sort of advocate for the fun side of security and find people that might be interested. Now you can actually start to build your sort of initial batch of who's going to be a part of this program. And you probably already have some in mind at this point. You might have had some in mind from the very get-go based on past experience, but the folks that show up to every single lunch and learn, they come to the CTF sessions regularly, they really want to learn about this, they're going to be a natural fit because of the excitement and the passion that they have for security. Also, from talking to the managers to shop this around and get buy-in, you may hear that there's some people who are really taking on some of that responsibility to begin with. You're probably not building your security program from scratch at this point, so there's probably already some people who have been stronger participants in what you've already been doing that would be a natural fit. Across all of those groups, though, really, I think volunteers are best. Over the years, we've had a mix of people that have been volunteers or people that have been voluntold. The voluntolds will do what you ask of them, but they're the ones who, they might come to the CTF session a few times, but then it kind of becomes a back burner for them. The day-to-day responsibility, they're still good, but they're not going to be as excited about really advancing their role in this security capacity. Again, as you're looking at who these candidates are, think about what your ideal candidates look like. So we try whenever possible to pick people that seem like they're an influencer on the team. That would be one way that really has been effective. So these are the people that years and years ago were talking about Docker before anyone else. Maybe now they're talking about Kubernetes. The best ones right now are probably talking about stuff that I haven't even heard about yet. But those people that are kind of the trailblazers, right? They're going to help you through that forest, right? I can bring it all back. They're out there looking at what's next. If they're a part of this program, that means they can also help you figure out how security figures into whatever is coming next. They also may be just really influential on the team based on things as simple as seniority. Maybe it is that developer that has been working on that product for such a long time. They know all the ins and outs, and they're going to be really influential in making sure the security asks get prioritized and don't just wither in the backlog. And that passion, even if they're someone who is pretty new and pretty junior to the team, even if they're really excited about this, they can still be a really good fit in steering that team towards accomplishing the goals that you're introducing. We accept security champions from any role within the team. We've got a variety of teams. Some are not quite waterfall, but something more in that realm, slowly working their way towards something more agile, to teams that are doing Scrum and Scrum Band and are cross-functional. Anyone who's interested, we don't exclude them from the program based on their role. If there's someone who's not writing code at all, but they are focused on the CI/CD pipelines for that team, well, they're great. There's still security considerations there, and the overall guild benefits from having that variety and having someone who really knows the build system and can come in and show you, oh, well, here's this really easy way to get that scan going, or when you're ready to break the build, here's the best way we've found to do that, and share that across the rest of the guild. But there's also some things to avoid, which we try to not accept anyone until they're established in their current role. So if they're a new hire, or if they have just transferred from one team to another on a different product line, we put sort of a 90-day waiting period on them to say, okay, we would love to have you. We don't want to overwhelm you with onboarding into the Security Champions program and all the new asks and the training that goes with that until you're established and sort of performing on the team. So we will ask people to hold on for that. And people that aren't overloaded. So these qualities I'm describing of what's a great security champion, those are great qualities for anyone on the team, right? So those are people that can be a great fit for other guilds maybe that your organization has, or they may take on more responsibility over time for the team. And we've seen some people get overloaded when they're the go-to for everything on the team, and they can't handle all of those, they can't wear all those hats at once. So we now try to avoid bringing in people that are likely to do, are likely to be in that situation. Okay, so from there, now you've found your champions, you've got an idea now of what can you ask of them. So this is where you get to actually see some return on all this investment. You get to, I don't know, maybe you were at a conference recently and you were thinking a lot about open source findings and putting together an SCA program because you've got some debt there, or trying to push something new like updating how you're doing your CSP. You probably have lots and lots of ideas about the things that you need to do for your program and the things you would love to get your development teams to work on for you. But also think about those asks at sort of two different levels. What are things that you can ask the security champion to do that are really just about interfacing with the security team and putting some things in place, right? So SCA, for example, if you know you've got a lot of SCA findings, or even earlier than that, you don't have any sort of like SCA scanning in your pipelines right now, but you need that. That doesn't take any specialized security knowledge. Any sort of junior security champion, and what we call sort of the phase one of that role, they can do that. They might need some extra instruction and some help from you, but you're not asking them to make any security decisions at that point. You're just asking them, hey, can you help get this tool built into your pipeline? Hopefully you've done a lot of work to show them how and give them some examples. Again, that idea of your team needs to be coding too, your team needs to learn your build systems. But you provide the method there, and then they're just implementing it. But then you can also, over time, start to introduce these phase two sorts of asks, which are things that actually do require some level of security expertise. Our example of this is security code review. Despite all of our automated security scanning, we still have a process for doing code reviews as part of peer review during sprints. And it's something we've been a bottleneck on because there's so few of us and so many developers, and we can't even properly plan for capacity when it comes to that work. But we built a 2-day training program for security champions with a very scoped focus on certain types of security code review that we thought was reasonable for them to do. So things like data validation, logging, error handling, topics that are not unfamiliar to them, that with some combination of e-learning, a 2-day training, and then an assessment, we had a high level of confidence that they could look for security vulnerabilities related to those controls in their peer reviews they were already doing. That's the type of sort of phase two. So this is what phase two is, where we see the security champions as really starting to bear fruit, right? This is when you can ask more of them than just sort of being able to copy and paste things and actually that example of a developer coming to me and saying, hey, I think I found a privilege escalation that no one knew about, and I think I have a fix. That's a real example. That's from a security champion that started off just as a dev, but after the exposure for a couple of years and the extra training, really was maturing into a dev with a strong understanding of security and ability to apply that to everything. I'd say the only other quick thing I'd say is once you've got the program established, you're going to have to do some things to make sure it keeps going. Rewards. You've got to have some forms of rewarding the security champions. So again, that's a very cultural thing. Maybe it can be something as simple as like stickers or a badge that somehow like shows that they're a part of that group, versus something more tangible like we offer security training, both internal as well as external. We have our own dedicated budget to send developers out to security conferences or additional security training. We've had one developer start trying to do his OCSP, but their manager doesn't have to pay for any of that. Their manager has to sign off on, oh yes, you can spend the time, you can go for 2 days to whichever conference that is, but it doesn't come out of their budget, which makes it a lot easier for those managers to say yes. So that's another type of reward. Also, creating that community, keeping everybody in touch, whether that's, your company's big on Slack or whatever communication mechanisms the developers are using, also build a community for the security champions to interact in that same environment. And monitoring, and this, I'll stop after this. Monitoring is important, right? Because we've said we're transferring some responsibility to the teams, but we're not lowering the bar in that process. So for us, our approach on how we were going to keep an eye on that, in addition to any other metrics and dashboards that we already had, we came up with this internal product security maturity model based on some other maturity models that we had internally. And this is an example. And this is a good one for pictures so that you can zoom in and actually see what it says. But we brainstormed. We said, okay, of all the different things we could ask teams to work on, let's pick a small subset. And for us, that was this. It was training, security design, secure code review, testing, and third-party component management. And then we started from, okay, they're doing nothing, to our expert level. What do we think a team that was like a perfect DevSecOps team, what would they be doing in all of these categories? And then we tried to fill in achievable milestones from 0 to the top there, and set up a system to check in with these teams over time and see, are you achieving these? So this was just one of the new ways that we introduced in terms of trying to see the impact of this program, in addition to things like flaw counts and findings counts, to really see, is this achieving what we were asking? And then finally, reflect and iterate. You've got to take this same approach that development uses these days and constantly question what you're doing and find where things aren't working, fail fast if something's not working, and find a new way forward. And make everything repeatable. I wish I had done that from the very start, right? This is what you're trying to get to, a nice, organized, repeatable sort of process for security champions, like bearing fruit. So everything you do with that first batch, if you're starting this fresh, make sure you keep all of that to reuse it for when you have to bring in the next batch, or when you get to the point that you're bringing in just single digit, one here and there across all the different teams. So, thank you. Okay, so first question, have you guys been able to have this program loop into their feedback and company promotion process? We haven't directly tied it into any sort of like promotion process, but we have incorporated it into the goals programs for security champions over time. And then we have also sort of from there, as the development team has changed how they prioritize that focus for developers, we have also shifted the way we prioritize the security champions' work. Is there a minimum baseline of knowledge for security champions? How do you establish that baseline? We do, so we don't look for any sort of baseline in terms of pre-existing security knowledge. We put them through some e-learning, some classroom internal instruction. The one thing that we do check in terms of sort of a baseline is we don't add anyone to the program without talking to their manager first. That has been good, both in terms of understanding how that person is performing. If they were someone that maybe just in terms of, if they're underperforming in what they're doing right now, maybe they're spreading themselves too thin, so we'll talk with the manager about that and say, okay, maybe they'll be good, but they can't do this right now. If the manager has any concerns about baseline competencies or anything like that, we would also be aware of that. Yeah, that's if someone wants to talk about e-learning, we can talk about that later. But yeah, I think that's all the questions. So thank you.